Today, working from home is here to stay long after the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the federal government's key economic advisor, the percentage of Australians working from home has jumped from 8% to 40% in the past 2 years, remaining high even when previous lockdowns have ended. Joining me live now is Michael Brennan. He's the chair of the Productivity Commission. Michael, I appreciate your time. It sounds like a significant proportion of us might never return to the office.
Well, I think most people will probably return to the office in some form. Bearing in mind, most jobs can't be done from home. We estimate around 2/3 of jobs are such that you really need to be having that in-person interaction. But about a third or 35% of jobs in principle could be done from home. And it's likely, given the experience of the pandemic, which for many turned out a little better, or at least working from home during the pandemic turned out a little bit better than many had thought, that we'll see some continuation of working from home even as restrictions lift.
Do we have a clear grip on what working from home actually does to workers' productivity? I mean, people gain time, obviously, from not needing to travel and commute, but there are other distractions at home, as we all well know.
Well, of course, opinions are a bit divided and every individual is different. So when you ask workers whether they are more productive, on average, they feel a little more productive at home, but many feel that they're about the same. Employers tend to have a slightly less rosy view, but in general have nonetheless felt that productivity hasn't fallen, particularly with people working at home. And bearing in mind, it's hard to separate the effect of working from home with all the other things that have been going on during restrictions and lockdowns, like homeschooling and just the restrictions and the impact of that in general. But for the most part, if anything, both workers and employers have found that it works a little bit better than they might have expected if you went back to 2019.
And so how could this affect employment opportunities going forward? And do we know much about a person's likely career progression if they don't have that sort of face-to-face time with their colleagues, with their boss in the office?
Well, I think that's certainly one of the things that is going to be teased out as we enter what will effectively be like a second wave of experimentation. I mean, we were forced to experiment from 2020 and then in many ways even now with COVID, with restrictions where workers were sent home. We had to work out how to make working from home a goer and make sure that we could do it as productively as possible. As restrictions ease, we think we'll be embarking on kind of like a second wave of experimentation where a whole lot of firms will try different things. And as part of that process, we'll all be learning what the right balance is. I think many businesses will go for the hybrid model. That's certainly what they indicate in surveys, where workers are in the office some of the time and at home the rest of the time. The question, I think, is what are some of those trade-offs? And clearly people will be a little worried about the loss of collaboration, the loss of sociability with peers, and that may play in a bit ultimately to career advancement as to whether you're building your human capital as much as you could be if you're isolated at home.
You know, when it comes to health and well-being, there are certainly benefits on that front, aren't there? And we have been seeing pushes for more flexibility in workplaces for so many years now. It has been typically seen as a sort of women's issue in terms of working part-time, having flexibility, working from home. But for men as well, clearly there is a lot to weigh up in terms of those health and well-being aspects.
Absolutely. The average commute in an Australian capital city nowadays is in excess of 60 minutes. So effectively, there's an hour in the day that can be freed up if people aren't commuting. And that's obviously quite popular for a lot of workers. There's also the flexibility that comes from being able to combine paid work with other tasks that you might have to undertake around the home. So there is a value proposition there for workers, and that's the reason many workers envisage that they'd like to stay working from home at least some of the time into the future. On the other hand, some people have concerns about whether isolation or overwork or the inability to really strictly separate work and family will take some toll. And I think they're things that both workers and employers, and to some extent governments, will need to keep a bit of an eye on.
And so, Michael, just finally, what does it mean for our CBDs around the country? I mean, these have been hives of activity. Is this the death of the central business district as we know it?
I don't think it does mean the death of the CBDs. Our CBDs and our cities in general have proven remarkably resilient in the past. And yes, they've evolved and adapted to change. And this will be a change because some of the people who are working in the CBD 5 days a week might be working a little less than that. So some of the hours worked will shift out to the suburbs. But in general, there are a lot of reasons to believe the city can adapt. The office may well have to evolve to be a more attractive place to a lot of workers so that they do want to go in more often. It may be that if there's less demand for office space, maybe rents fall a bit, but that might then attract new and different businesses into the CBD. I think the attraction of being centrally located still remains. So I don't think that we're likely to see a really significant hollowing out of cities. So the death of the CBD, I would say, is greatly exaggerated.
Office owners in the CBD will be happy to hear that one. Michael Brennan, the Chair of the Productivity Commission, appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
No worries. Thank you very much.